right. So hello, everyone. Hello. How's everyone doing? Great, great. Good to see all of you. So welcome. My name is Coach Colette, and I am the host of the Start Within podcast, and I am so excited to welcome you to the first live podcast event for Coach Chat Live. So woohoo! Thank you, everyone. And I'm really excited to welcome my guest on Coach Chat Live, which is Ashlee Wisdom.
Hi, everybody.
And Ashlee is the founder of Health in Her Hue, and we're going to talk all about Black women's health. And I wanted to give you a little bit of more information about what Health in Her Hue does. So Health in Her Hue is a digital platform that actually connects Black women with health care resources, services, and providers that are committed to, I'm going to say to our health and well-being. And it also seeks to empower us and our allies to really be able to learn, share, and innovate around health issues that disproportionately affect us. So let's welcome Ashlee to the Coach Chat.
Thanks. Hi. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So how did we get here? Was this an idea that you had to start Health in Her Hue?
Yeah, so literally, I was in grad school at NYU and working full-time, and the place that I was working in was very toxic for me as a Black woman. And then, so dealing with that, and then being in grad school and learning, I was pursuing my master's in public health, so I'm learning all these things about health disparities and seeing all the statistics about Black women, and then experiencing a toxic work environment at a leading healthcare institution and seeing like in person what systemic racism actually looks like. And I just felt activated to do something. I felt like I'm seeing firsthand what I'm learning in this very academic space and what I'm reading in these journals. What can I do to bring awareness to this issue? What can I do to help Black women go into healthcare providers' offices with their eyes wide open and knowing that, some of these providers that you go to they don't have your best interest in mind. And so you need to be an advocate for yourself. And so that's the place where Health in Her Hue was derived from. It was like my own personal experience, trying to leverage my academic experience to help the community, but that was ultimately the space that I was coming from. Yeah.
I mean, so we know that your qualifications are awesome and stellar. Howard grad. I don't know if there are any Howard alums in the room. Yes, and also your MPH. And so I think, I think it's awesome that you're bringing your expertise and your background and your passion to this issue. So thanks to the Start Within team, we did our homework, and I want to share some stats with the audience to give a little bit more context about why, not that we need to, but why there is the reason for Health in Her Hue. So Black women are three to four times more likely to die in pregnancy. We are 3 times more likely to have fibroids. We have a 1 in 9 chance of getting breast cancer, and we have a 1 in 31 chance of dying from breast cancer. About 57% of Black women are above their natural or normal body weight, which is in comparison to only about 38% for Black men. So there's definitely an increase there. And on the mental health side, which is the issue that's a passion for me, we have a consistently higher feelings of sadness, hopelessness, worthlessness, and everything feels like an effort. Does anyone feel any of those things? Yeah, me too. So I think that it's an opportune time for you to have started this venture. And I was excited to learn that HUE is actually an acronym. So can you let our audience know what HUE actually stands for?
So when I was thinking about the name for Health in Her Hue, I'm laughing because I see my little sister in the audience. But I remember I was in bed and she happened to be spending the night with me. And I was in bed and I was like trying to think of the name that I wanted to use for this platform that I was creating. And I think one of the names that I came up with was very corny. Can't think of it right now, but I shared it with them and with her and my brother, and they were like, yeah, that's not it. And so I was in bed on my iPhone in the notes section, just thinking about like, how can I infuse like health and then like color. I wanted that all to be a part of the title, but I also didn't want to just use hue because I felt like that was also kind of cheesy and like cliche. And so I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna use hue, it has to have a purpose behind it. And so the Hugh actually stands for, I'll say the full name, so it's Health in Her Heard and Understood Experiences. So that's what the Hugh stands for. And that's essentially what I want the purpose of the platform to be, is that I wanted to create a space where Black women's experiences could be heard and understood, first by us and then by the community at large. And so that's how I came up with the name.
Yeah. And naming is so important, right? Because it's part of putting words to an issue. And so that sense of understanding is what really jumps out at me, right? That sense of, do our healthcare providers understand what we are going through?
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you find that that is an issue or a problem for us?
Yeah, so I think as no shade to providers, but I think a lot of time clinicians get caught up in the clinical aspect of care without taking into account all these other social things that are impacting Black women in particular, and how those things impact our health. And so when I use the word understood experiences, I really wanted to like capture that there are other aspects to Black women's lives outside of our physical being that needs to be taken into account when we're sitting in that clinical room. So like dealing with microaggressions at work or in school, like in college, I'm sure a lot of us have experienced microaggressions in various spaces that we've been, whether it be shopping in the store and you have somebody following you around thinking that you're gonna steal, all those different things that we experience day to day as Black women. And that's like scratching the surface. I'm not even going into the deep stuff like where you were educated, like the community that you were born into. All those things are impacting our health, and we really need providers to think about that and have those things in mind when they're interacting with us as they're caring for us.
And so I think I know part of the answer for this, but why was it important for you to create this community for Black women and by Black women?
So I think Black women often kind of we get left to the wayside a lot of times. We get discounted, we get overlooked, or we get lumped together with all women of color. And the latter isn't too bad, but at the same time, like as Black women, we deal with very specific issues that are, very specific to us. So like dealing with the intersection of race, sexism, sexism, classism, dealing with our sexual orientation. We have so many different things that are related to our identity that requires like us to address it specifically. So not just like kind of like putting a big blanket over our issues, but addressing it head on. And so I was very intentional about making the space for Black women because I think we need spaces that are specific to us, and that's not to say that other people's issues aren't important. That's not to say that our issues are more important than other people. It's to say that we deserve to have spaces where we can just talk about the things that impact us and only impact us, because no one else is doing it. And so that's why I wanted to create a space, and I knew no one else is going to be that intentional about saying Black women. It's very easy to say women of color. It's not always the most politically correct thing to say Black women, and I think that a lot of the issues that we're experiencing warrants being addressed specifically.
And do you think, did that cause any challenges when you decided, okay, I'm standing up, this is a platform for Black women, by Black women? Did that cause any, do you think, additional challenges on your founder's journey, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I've had men say, what about us? I've had people talk about reverse racism. So there are all those things that I anticipated coming up, But of course, when you see the comments, they're frustrating. It's like, okay, every time Black women create a space that's dedicated to us, everybody wants to be a part of it. But nobody wants to create spaces that address the issues that are specific to us. And so it's been frustrating at times having to defend the purpose behind me being intentional about naming Black women in what I'm doing with Health in Her Hue. But I've just learned to keep true to like the purpose of why I created it. You just read off a bunch of statistics that validate the need for a space like this. And so it's just been an internal, not struggle, but I've had to deal with those arguments internally and just like remember that I can't get sidetracked by that. I don't have to constantly get caught up in defending why I'm doing this. I know that there's a purpose behind this. I know that it's needed, and that's where I choose to focus my energy.
So how do you not get sidetracked? Because I mean, as any founder here or myself knows that it's so easy to get sidetracked, and now it's almost like adding this extra layer of challenge on top of it. So how have you been able to stay on course or stay aligned with your intention for the platform?
Every so often I go and I look at the mission and the vision that I created, and that centers me. So before I launched the website, I was like, okay, I need to think about why I'm going to push go on this. I had to be very clear and explicit about the purpose behind this platform and my vision for it long term so that it can keep me activated. And so every now and then when I'm tempted to get sidetracked, or when I'm discouraged, or when people ask me questions that make me think like, am I crazy for creating a space that's only for Black women? I look back at that mission and vision and I remember that night in my bedroom where I was like, I need to do this, and that's what helps me stay focused.
And what has been the reception for this platform so far?
It's been amazing and surprising. Like it's awkward to say surprisingly so because I know that it was needed, but I didn't think people would have responded to it as much as as well as they have. So it's been exciting. It's been frightening, to be very transparent, but the response to it has been overwhelmingly great. Like almost every day I go on the Health in Her Hue Facebook or Twitter page, I have someone either DMing us or leaving a comment saying that this platform is needed, or when I'm writing papers, your platform is one of the first places that I go to, even before I go to the academic journals, just to know what are the things that Black women are actually talking about, what they're concerned about. So there's definitely like a great community response, and that is what keeps me amped up and going.
And so I've read a lot about the services and the resources, and then is there also an intention for the connection with actual practitioners and providers?
Yeah, so that is a work in process, but we are being intentional about our mission and our vision and saying that we're connecting people to providers. So every month we have a newsletter where we feature a Black female provider, and it's centered around a specific health topic. So that's like step one. We have Black providers and healthcare professionals who are writing content on the site. So that's we have their bios, we link to their social media. So that's another level of connection. And then trying to also build this tech factor into our tech piece to it, where we're working on an app where it'll be easy for Black women to easily search up, put in your insurance company, put in your location, and connect with the Black providers that are in your geographic area. So that's something that's we're still building on that. And then in terms of connecting further, the next iteration of Health in Her Hue is creating a space where Black providers, clinicians, or healthcare professionals who've identified different pain points in the healthcare system, they can submit them, and then we want to connect Black women who have ideas and solutions to essentially build solutions to address those particular pain points and problems. And then the ideas, as Black women, we're creatives, we're like very talented, build those apps, build those solutions, whether they're technical or not technical, and then find funders who can help us bring those ideas into the real world. So that's how we're trying to do this connecting pieces with Health in Her Hue.
Wow, that sounds amazing, and I hope you'll keep us posted on like the next iteration.
Absolutely.
And let us know when the app is live. So I want to switch a little bit to you and as a founder, so founder to founder. So how do you nurture your own health and well-being?
So I saw, it's like layered. So the physical piece, I try to work out. And that's always a work in progress. Is you're busy as a founder. I have a 9 to 5, but I'm also building Health in Her Hugh, so it's not always easy to make time. But my whole platform is about prioritizing health and wellness. So I've been doing better at carving out time and being intentional about scheduling time to work out. The other factor is like mental health. So I take time to really just unplug and I'm an extrovert. I love to socialize, but then there are moments where I'm just like, I can't see anybody right now. I just need to go in my little corner and just be by myself and just do me. And that's another way that I practice like self-care and just trying to maintain my health. Also making time to spend time with my friends and my family who help nurture my spirit and my soul. And then last but certainly not least, my the spiritual side of me. I make sure that I pray. I make sure I make time to, just spend time with God, because that keeps me centered. And so doing all those things are the ways that I basically help maintain my physical, mental, and spiritual well-being.
That's amazing. And I think that for me too, it's, I feel like it's like, how do I walk the talk? Because we have a self-care challenge, right? So that's one of the ways that I'm like, oh wait, I need to do this,
it yourself,
not just promoting it or sharing it. So Thank you for that. I wanted to loop in our Talk Back Tuesday. This is the Coach Chat meets Talk Back Tuesday. So the question was, do you have a community? So I'm going to presume the answer is,
oh yeah,
yes. So I guess who is on? I always ask it like, who is on your squad? So who is in your community of supporters that you can reach out to when times get tough?
So I definitely have a great close-knit group of girlfriends who we meet up once a month for girls' night in, or we meet up for brunch and we just kind of chat, debrief on life, vent to each other about work, who's getting on our nerves, all of that. So I would say my core group of girlfriends are part of my squad, and then my family. So, this past weekend I went hiking with my family, and they live upstate New York now, so they're not always very convenient to see, but just spending time with them was refreshing, and it helped me recharge, and just spending time with people who genuinely love you and support you, that is something that's very important to me. So I would say that's my squad. And I have other people who I know who ride for me as well, who are part of my squad. But I would say the core group is my core group of friends, my family, and then also my church. I grew up in church, so my church family is also a network of support that I tap into from time to time.
Because I saw a couple of the quotes that you shared on the platform today around the fact that social networks and community and friends are really important to our health and well-being, and how the numbers are actually going down, that people have fewer people on their squad, if you will, or in their community, and that's impacting our health, right?
Right. And so the article that I was reading that kind of inspired that question was talking about community care and not just self-care, and the importance of us, I don't think we always think about how our community has, it impacts basically our health at some point. So when you become sick, who are the people that you're tapping into? I did a session recently with a group of Black women, and they were talking about who, after giving birth to, I've never given birth, so I really don't know what that experience is like, but the postpartum experience and having people come to your house to see you and to help, basically look after you now that you have this new human being that you now are responsible for. And if you don't have a core group of friends or family to come and support you, and a lot of people don't, how that impacts your ability to become a good mother, to be a mother, to take care of yourself first and foremost so you can be a good mother. And I don't think I personally haven't really thought about the fact that I take my community for granted a lot of times. But if I were, when I came up with the question, I thought about it, I was like, yes, I do have a community where if I were to get sick, if something were to happen to me, I know that there would be people there that I can tap on to do certain things for me. And the fact that some people can't say that they have that it's very disheartening. And so I wanted to kind of bring that to people's attention and think like, hey, if something happens to me or if I'm feeling down, do I have someone that I can hit up really quickly to say like, hey, I need someone to vent to, I need someone to talk to, or like I'm literally sick and can't get out my bed, can you go and get me food? Those are some of the things that we don't always think about very specifically, but we should probably take them into consideration.
Right. And the challenge is because when we're in that situation of that, like, oh, I need help or I'm sick, right? That's the hardest time to try to find those people, right?
So and that's when you recognize if you really have those kind of people in your life.
Exactly. So somewhat connected to that, I know we've talked about it a little bit off air, but one of my intentions is around Disrupt Strong. So my hashtag Disrupt Strong to me means about how we can disrupt the strong Black woman narrative. And so I wanted to talk with you about that and get your thoughts on the narrative, and also in particular, I guess, A, connected to this community, and then I guess B, also connected to how that impacts our health. So what are your thoughts on the strong Black woman narrative?
So I think historically, Black women have felt the need to like just to be strong, and we actually had to for our families, and there are a lot of systemic issues or things that factored into why we kind of had to step up and take on that role. And we're still dealing with a lot of those systemic issues, quite frankly, and so a lot of us still do feel the need to be that strong Black woman for our family, for our friends, at work. But I do think we need to, we do need to actually think about the ways that we, or the areas in our life where we don't necessarily always have to show up strong, and embrace the fact that vulnerability, that acknowledging the fact that you're burnt out, that you're tired, is okay. Like, you can still be a strong Black woman and acknowledge the fact that at some point you have limits, mentally, physically. And so that's kind of like the perspective that I take, is like, how do we as Black women, we can stand in the pride that we have in having to have overcome so many obstacles and just basically barriers, but taking the time to think about those times when we don't have to show up strong, and being intentional about being vulnerable, being intentional about taking time off, and communicating when we're like feeling overwhelmed and things like that.
Like the fact that no is a complete sentence.
Exactly.
But that's easier said than done.
It is.
And I think, and I guess in terms of the health impacts, like what are the consequences when we live out the narrative, would you say? So
there's a professor, Dr. Geronimus, Arline Geronimus, I think she's a professor at the University of Michigan, and she has this theory called weathering. And it basically talks about like how toxic stress how it causes Black women to basically deteriorate over time, physically and biologically. And so you don't always see the effects outright, but then it leads to certain things like we've been seeing like Serena Williams and Beyonce, and most recently Alice and Felix, who are Black women who are athletes or dancers who are working out all the time, nearly dying after giving birth. And so this theory speaks to the fact that you can be the most healthy Black woman in terms of like physical stuff, have all the access to the best resources, to the best doctors, to the best food, and still have a near-death experience doing one of the most basic things that women do, is giving birth, because of the constant stress that we as Black women experience and also internalize. Right. And so that causes, that necessitates us to have a conversation about what are the things that we can do to basically not, to the point that I was making before, not always have to show up strong, but there are also certain factors that are out of our control. Like we can't stop racism, we can't stop sexism, and those things are impacting our health. But I think the thing that we can do is bring these issues to light, right, and challenge the systems that are basically negatively impacting our health. Right.
And it goes back to that self-care and community care that you were talking about as well, right? So like we can't control the other person and their reaction. So when we experience a microaggression, but we can control how we process it and let it go, and aim to not internalize all of the negativity that's coming towards us.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing, yeah. So one of the questions that I ask all of my guests on this podcast is, what does start within mean to you?
Starting in. So I would say starting within means doing the inner work to learn, to evolve, and to grow. And asking yourself, like being patient with yourself, but asking yourself the hard questions that basically are necessary to grow and become your best self. So it's a twofold thing of being perceptive, being, what's the word that I'm looking for? Being intentional about thinking within yourself, and essentially being open and free to basically challenge yourself when you see that you're like going in the wrong direction, or to like celebrate yourself when you've seen growth. So that's what I would say starting within is.
That's amazing, and I love all of what you said, and I love that last part about celebrating, because I think sometimes we, particularly, I don't know, as founders, like, you know, you're always thinking so far ahead.
Right.
And how do you celebrate the small wins?
Right.
And I think so one win we can celebrate is that Health in Her Hue is having its 1-year anniversary. So can we? So you are well on the journey of helping Black women to improve our health and well-being. So I'm so excited that we had this conversation together, and I'm sure that there are people in the audience that want to learn a bit more and ask some questions.
Sure.
So we'll open it up for Q&A if people do have questions that they want to ask Ashlee or ask myself. And we've got the microphone here. Does anyone have questions?
Back to the question about what you were, you know what? This outline is actually going to affect. Use the microphone.
So kind of like coinciding with what you said earlier about there being an increase in Black women having fibroids, that's actually like something that is like in my family. Is there a specific reason why that's so like prominent? Is there like, you know, a health reason? My bad. I forgot that y'all need the mic. I was like, let me hand that to other people too if you wanna.
So I did some research on that, and there actually isn't enough research as to why Black women are disproportionately impacted by this issue of fibroids. Some researchers have pointed to chemicals like getting relaxers, quite frankly, but there isn't any hard evidence that can point to a specific thing. But that was one of the things that I saw. To that point, the fact that there isn't enough research on fibroids is a problem. And so that's something else that I want Health in Her Hue to be a space for. It's like, we need more clinical trials, focus on the issues and the clinical and health issues that impact us specifically. Because fibroids are disproportionately affecting us, people aren't necessarily going to prioritize funding studies like that. But the more that we bring attention to that, the more that we have these conversations in public spaces and in private spaces behind closed doors with the people who are making important decisions, is the more that we can advocate for that, because we do need to figure out what that is. I think as Black women, one of the places we can start is having the conversations with women in our family. So if we find out that we have a fibroid, go home and ask your mom or your aunties, like, did you experience this, so you can recognize if it's like family history. But the long and short of it is that there isn't enough research to really point to a specific thing.
Right. And that was going to be my point, right? The fact that we don't have the answer, right?
Exactly.
So that sense of how do we elevate issues of Black women's health to be a priority, to be something that there is interest in researching and learning more about.
Exactly. And then to build off of that point, and I don't want to hog up the Q&A session, but to build off of that point, a lot of these clinical trials they don't include us, because there's a lot of distrust in the Black community with the healthcare system, and rightfully so, just given the history. But there is a need for us to be involved in these clinical trials because these doctors are actually making clinical decisions based on studies. And if we're not in these studies, those studies aren't reflective of how they impact us. And so when we go into clinical settings and doctors are prescribing certain medications, so as some of the questions we should ask is like, has this medication been tested on people? Like, are there studies that are representative of the community or the population at large? Are there side effects that are specific to people of color? Like asking those very pointed questions, because a lot of these decisions are being made based on studies that don't involve us, and that's a problem that we have to address both on our end of getting more involved in these trials and also the medical field's part in helping to create that trust so that more Black and brown people can feel comfortable enrolling in clinical trials so we can get the answers to these questions.
As a young female, how do you feel a young girl should go about maintaining her health as becoming a woman?
So I would start with having very candid discussions and conversations with your provider, with your doctor. Ask all the questions there that you want to ask. Like if you are curious about something related to health, before your next checkup, Google, look it up, and then be prepared to have that conversation with your doctor. One, it shows that you're being intentional about your health, which will then hopefully cause your doctor to see that this person is being very proactive, and I need to make sure that I show up on par with this for this patient. So I would say do your own research, do your own digging on the things that you're curious about. Have conversations with the women in your family to know what are some of the things, the health issues that have come up with other women in the family that I may need to be aware of so I can be proactive about taking care of my health. And then I know right now birth control, I heard someone share a story that she was just kind of like prescribed birth control without any context, without any information, without the options that she had. And that is a problem. As young Black girls, we should know what our options are so we can make conscious decisions and not just have this doctor making that decision for us. Because to the point of like creating Health in Her Hugh, a lot of these providers are not, let me not say a lot, some of these providers don't have our best interests at heart. And so we need to be aware of what they're prescribing us. So I would say like as a young girl, start to find information that you're curious about, start there, start asking questions with your family members, and even have conversations with your friends. Like what are your friends talking about or what are they like dealing with? So you can start to think proactively about the things that you may need to be considering.
So I know like in my family and actually a lot of like friends that I know who are women, I kind of hear what sounds like chronic pain a lot. Like, oh, I always have backaches and I always have like shoulder pain and I always have all this, pain, which, sounds kind of crazy, but it's typically dealt with like, oh, that's just getting older. From your perspective or the public health perspective, when is it an issue and when is it actually, oh, that is just getting older?
So I would say any pain that's causing discomfort to the point that you can't do your basic life functions without, like just normally, that's something that you should be bringing up to your provider and being very intentional about like, this is disrupting my ability to live like a whole healthy life, because there are studies that show that doctors don't take our pain seriously as Black women. So one, we've been kind of normalized to like, as you said, to rationalize why I'm experiencing this pain, like come up with all these different reasons as to why. But if it's really interrupting and disrupting your like ability to do your day-to-day activities, it's something that you should bring up to your provider and say very pointedly that I'm dealing with this pain and I need you to take it seriously. So like, let's figure out what's going on here. We should not take any pain that's going on in our body, like treat it like it's nothing, because one, you know your body more than anybody else. So if you're experiencing pain that's out of the norm, it's definitely something you should be paying attention to. Like, when is it happening? Is it recurring consistently? And pay attention to that so that when you do speak to your provider, you can say those specific things. But as Black women, I think we should be more intentional about paying attention to the pain that we experience, both physically and, of course, emotionally. But definitely paying attention and bringing it up to our providers when we notice something like that.
Right, and I think it is interesting to think about, right, the things that we think are, just part of getting older, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily that that's the case. And for me, I also think about diet and nutrition, because a lot of people have changed their physical well-being just by changing what they eat. So, and I think, and in our community, that's something that, we are starting to look at in terms of, how can we make the foods that we love in a healthier way, so that, because sometimes, I'm not a doctor, but that sense of like pain and inflammation being very linked, and so looking at sugar and salt and all those kinds of things. And I would definitely agree around the tracking, like when does it happen?
Right.
And the same thing with mental health, right? Like what are the triggers that make you feel a certain way, and being able to track it the same way that you track your physical health.
Exactly.
Got it?
How you guys doing? I just want to know, does Health and Her Hugh plan on hosting any more informative events such as this, like this year or early next year, or like health fairs and stuff, like community-based stuff that can get a group of people together to really learn about your business and also learn about what you're speaking about?
So that is definitely in the plan. We did our first event partnering with this amazing company, and I'm going to plug them real quick. It's called, our initiative, the Renee. And so the woman who founded it, she is a product manager, so she works in the tech space. And what she's been doing is applying this design thinking approach to the maternal mortality problem, which I think is absolutely genius. And so she happened to, I reached out to her because I saw a Fast Company article featuring her. I reached out to her. She happened to be in New York. I happened to have a space for us to put on an event, and we made it happen. And so in that event, we basically had Black women come together, specifically around the issue of maternal mortality and maternal health. And we had a design thinking session, like a sprint, where they talked about their pregnancy experiences. Some of them spoke about their miscarriages. And then as they shared stories, we then thought about pain points, like what were the the problems that we identified in them sharing those stories, and created amazing solutions in that session. And so I want to host more events like that, where I can bring Black women in a room, talk about these issues, and think about ways that we as a community can create these solutions for ourselves. And so the short answer to that is yes, but that would be the purpose behind convening an event for Health and Her Hugh.
That's fantastic, and I'm excited, and I'd love to know more about those events, and we'll definitely make sure to share them with the Start Within community, because I think that what you're doing is awesome and fantastic. And just doing a scan, do we have any other questions before we do our wrap? All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on this first Coach Chat Live podcast event, and I'm really excited by what you're doing, and I think it's so important, and I love that you're taking the stand for Black women's health and being intentional about it. So thank you for all that you're doing. Congratulations on 1 year anniversary.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of you all for coming out this evening to support also the Start Within podcast. You can learn more about what we're doing at startwithincoaching.com/podcast. And you can definitely subscribe to hear this episode and other future episodes. But until then, I am Coach Colette, helping you to start within to finish strong. Thank you.